women were then told, you're just like a man. Whatever a man can do, you can do. And that's how all this began. So therefore, women started dressing like men. Women started having haircuts like men. And eventually, some mentally ill men went, right, well, that means I can be a woman.
It is factually inaccurate to say only women have cervixes. That's Emily Thornberry, allegedly a woman.
Yeah.
The phrase only women can have a cervix is something that should not be said. It isn't right. That was Keir Starmer, the alleged Prime Minister. Lisa Nandy said, I think trans women, are women and they should be accommodated as in prison as they decide. So she was saying you can decide what prison you go to, a man or a woman. And I don't just want to pick on Labour. Let's go to Tories as well. Penny Mordaunt gave a speech in the House of Commons when she said exactly the same thing, that a trans woman is a woman and should be treated as a woman, which actually cost her a decent run at the Tory leadership afterwards.
No, absolutely. Now, we all think this craziness is a fairly new thing, but this has been going on for decades and decades and decades. Do you know how all this started?
No, go on.
All right, so gender ideology came out of the feminist movement in the 60s. So in the 60s, we had something in university called women's studies, which then changed its name then to gender studies by the late 60s. And it was looking at gender roles, sex roles in society and women's place in society. And as we know, through the 70s and 80s, women were then told, you're just like a man. Whatever a man can do, you can do. And that's how all this began. So therefore, women started dressing like men. Women started having haircuts like men. And eventually, some mentally ill men went, right, well, that means I can be a woman. If you can be a man, dress like a man, work like a man, do everything like a man, then I can do everything I want like a woman. This all started through feminism in the 60s. And then by the time we got to the 70s, there was a split in the feminist movement. There's a million splits in the feminist movement. Pardon me. And that's where we get the word TERF from, because in the 70s, we had the progressive feminists who wanted to keep pushing. And we would call them woke feminists now. But then you also had the feminists who were, a good example is Julie Bindel. Julie Bindel just hates men. Julie Bindel doesn't hate trans women. She doesn't hate trans people. She doesn't like trans women, not because they're trans, but because they're men. And she hates men. So they then became called TERFs by the progressive feminists. So TERF stands for trans exclusionary radical feminists, because they didn't want trans women to be included in the title of women. So basically, feminists cause this problem. It affects women the most, because we don't have a problem with a naked woman walking into our changing rooms. We may feel uncomfortable, but not for one moment do we think she's going to sexually assault us, because we're stronger than her. But when you're a woman and you're smaller and you're physically weaker, every man is a danger to you to a certain extent, and they're more sensitive to that, and rightly so, because some men are perverts and violent offenders. So feminism has always damaged women and damaged children and damaged the family, and hence why I'm not a supporter of J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is right on this issue. She's completely right, and I give her credit for funding this campaign and being outspoken. But almost everything else she believes in is completely wrong. That's how we've got here, through feminism.
Isn't it funny how these, it's not just feminism, but every single one of these little, what they're called, protest groups, pressure groups, whatever you want to call them, they always end up eating themselves alive. And this is what always happens, predominantly really on the left, but it happens in all these groups. You look at the BLM, you look at the suffragettes and all stuff. I'm not, the cause might be righteous, equal rights, civil rights movement, etc., but it always goes too far. They always get appeased to an extent, and then they think they can do whatever they want. If they get stamped out straight away, or just told, right, you've gone far enough now, then that would be acceptable. That would be fine. Like BLM, for example, you could say that, yes, you have equal rights to white people. job done. But no, it has to go too far. You have to bring in DEI, you have to bring in ESG, and we must have 50% of that and all this stuff. With feminists, it goes from the suffragettes who had a righteous cause. To be fair, they wanted votes for women. No, there's no issue there, is there? Nobody'd say that. So that's not in these days. But then it turns in, like you just said, it turns into TERFs, or it turns into, you get the LGBTQ plus minus whatever they are now. Then you get the LGB Alliance because they can't stand the T bit of it, and they all split off into different groups and they can't stand each other. Then you get your women who can't stand to have a door held open for them by a man. You know, they're all extremists in their own way, and they all go too far for their 15 minutes of fame, their Andy Warhol moment. It's absolutely ridiculous that the government, you know, the politicians, the governments, they fuel this because they can't wait to jump on the next bandwagon. That tosser, Starmer and Rayner couldn't wait to get a picture taken on bended knee for BLM, something they've regretted ever since because it always comes back to haunt them. But they don't think, they just jump on the next passing bandwagon because they think there might be a few votes in it, not realizing that the majority of these causes or so-called causes are actually very, very minority held views. The vast majority of the population don't believe in. And like you just said, you get a changing room, for example. How uncomfortable would it be getting changed in front of a woman and vice versa? I've been to restaurants. In fact, I'll give you one, you'll know it, the Ivy in Manchester. You go to the Ivy in Manchester now, you go upstairs to the toilets, and last time I was there, I had to walk in following a woman to the toilet, and you could see her looking over her shoulder in the mirrors as I'm following her into the toilet, and she's thinking, what's this bloke going to potentially do to me in this toilet now? And I'm thinking, God, this is awkward, so I'm trying to walk slower, so she's walking further in front of me. It's just not on. You should not be allowed. If you're not bothered, go and use a disabled toilet. We don't need gender neutral toilets. Disabled toilets are gender neutral. Go into them.
And disabled toilets were created for disabled people, and I class mentally ill people as disabled. So those toilets were designed for them. If we're talking about toilets, if you ever go to GB News, to their studios in Paddington, their toilets are gender neutral. And when I go in there, I'm extremely uncomfortable. It's like, this is GB News and they've got gender neutral toilets. It's not because they wanted them, it's because the offices they took over were small and only had space for one set of toilets. I understand why they didn't design them, they're already like that. But you know, but I'm sick of it. I don't want gender neutral toilets. And talking about history, so that's the feminist side of it. Let's bring it up to date. So the reason why the trans lunacy took off was because of 2014 in the UK. And in the UK, something important happened in 2014, and that was gay marriage was legalized. And suddenly, organizations and charities like Stonewall went, fantastic, we've won. Oh, crap, we're out of business. What am I going to do for a job? I've got a fantastic pension here. I'm really good at making people feel guilty and giving us money. We can't close down now that we've won everything we ever wanted. We need to carry on. Oh, I remember I spoke to some mentally ill men a couple of months ago wearing dresses. Why don't we stick up for them now? And they changed. That's when the T got added to everything, was 2014. And it was just a continuation of social justice just to keep the fight going. Douglas Murray talks about this in one of his books. He calls it St. George and the Dragon Syndrome. And what he talks about is St. George slays the dragon and gets all the accolade and famous, and he goes around the country then looking for more dragons to slay, and he slays them all. And eventually he can be seen on top of a hill waving his sword at invisible dragons, because that's all he knows how to do, is to kill dragons. And there is no more dragons to kill, so he makes them up so he can kill them. And that's what happened with all the LGB charities and organizations.
It's a great analogy. I've never heard that before. It's really good.